There's a moment that we all hit, even as high achievers, in our personal development or our somatic proficiency that feels confusing and honestly a little humiliating when you see it. We can understand ourselves better than ever. We are aware, we are professionals, we are articulate, we are attuned to our internal state. We know all the things, and yet we find ourselves in a season where we're exhausted, we're brittle, we're not our best, we're quietly burned out by things that shouldn't honestly be that hard anymore, but they are. So, what's happening in that moment isn't a failure of insight, it's somatic bankruptcy. And I want to explore it with you today because it hits all of us, no matter how long we've been on this journey of mind and body mastery. This happens when we are trying to spend a capacity that our nervous system doesn't currently have. You'll see this in yourself, you'll see this in your clients. But before we go into this, I want to frame this really clearly because it isn't a metaphor. Nervous systems operate on real limits, like bank accounts. So there's a finite amount of load that they can carry while remaining organized. And awareness alone does not increase that limit. It's just like logging into your bank account and seeing where the balance is doesn't add more money to it, you know? Architecture does, deposits do, and that's the core issue. People will assume that because they can perceive more, they can handle more, or the insight is going to immediately translate into capacity. And that's a mistake of awareness for capacity, which we've explored in some of our other videos. But then we'll go a step further and start making withdrawals against a system that has never actually been capitalized. So think of that as making withdrawals on a bank account that isn't getting deposits put back in. And it works for a while and then it doesn't. Just like financial bankruptcy, somatic bankruptcy, it's not always dramatic at first. It'll show up quietly. Recovery will start taking longer. Small stressors feel disproportionately heavy. Things will start to accumulate. Emotional labor becomes draining instead of generative. Decision making, it feels expensive. You don't feel like you can access all of you the way that you used to. And the system is always managing, but it's never actually stabilizing, releasing, recovering, and re-engaging. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or you lost your mojo. It just means that your account is not being funded. So capacity is built at the level of architecture. And by architecture, we mean the physical and neurological structures that determine whether your system can bear load. This is posture that can transmit force instead of collapsing. Breath that can circulate pressure instead of trapping it or accumulating. Attention that can stay coherent instead of fragmenting when demands stick. So without that architecture, awareness just increases expenditure. You'll notice more tension, and so you try to manage it. You'll feel more emotion, so you try to process it or express it. You'll sense more relational complexity, and so you'll try to hold it. And all of those moves, by the way, cost energy. And so, if the underlying system hasn't been strengthened, you're just continually overdrafting. This is why awareness first models fail so many people. They encourage people to open up perception without first building the vessel, the container that can metabolize what comes in. So it's like installing floor to ceiling windows in a house with no load bearing beams. It looks expansive, it feels open, but the first real snowstorm or weight reveals the problem. Architecture must precede awareness if awareness is going to be reliable and sustainable. Otherwise, sensation lies. Not because the signal is false, but because the system receiving it cannot discriminate what matters from what doesn't. Everything feels urgent because everything is expensive to an overdrafted system. This is also why it's easy to confuse fatigue with resistance or overwhelm with truth. When you're bankrupt, every purchase feels risky. When you're somatically bankrupt, every demand feels like too much. Real capacity changes that. When architecture is built, awareness becomes cheaper. Sensation moves through instead of sticking. Pressure circulates instead of accumulating. Recovery actually restores rather than just pausing the collapse. This is what Becoming the Grand Formidable, our new release, is fundamentally about. The substrate held within that book isn't philosophy. It's an ordering principle. So you build the internal infrastructure, structure, breath, attention first, so that awareness and becoming more sovereign and well-resourced becomes something you can trust versus something that drains you. There's a principle within the substrate called bring the weather, and it lives here too. If you don't have internal capacity, you will borrow it from the environment. So you'll take cues from the room consciously, but usually subconsciously, and you'll match other people's urgency. You'll let conditions dictate your state of being because your system doesn't have reserves to do otherwise. That's not personal weakness, that's physics. And so it's why no amount of coaching insight or intentions or self-understanding can substitute for capacity training. You can't talk your way out of somatic debt. You can't reflect your way or journal your way into more reserves. You have to build them. And capacity is built the same way that any real reserve is built. Repeated exposure to load so that the system can survive, integrate, and clear. Not dramatic stress, not endless stress, appropriately dosed, calibrated, followed by full recovery over time. That's what capitalizes the system. Those are the deposits in your bank. Once that happens, everything else can change. Awareness will stop feeling like work or even conscious. Responsibility stops feeling like threat. Intensity stops feeling personal. And you don't become numb, you become solvent. And solvency is freedom. If you feel like you've been constantly managing yourself, constantly regulating, constantly trying to stay on top of your inner world, or you have clients who are navigating those things, there's a good chance that you're not failing at awareness. You're just spending capacity that you don't have. So build the architecture first. Let awareness spend from that surplus then instead of debt. That's the difference between insight that exhausts you and capacity that actually holds. We love this stuff. If you want to train with us live, consider joining us for a season of the Prestige where we hold simulators as live events. You will get to experience the substrate in depth with us, applied to your own targets and growth and your own professional proficiency. Hope to see you there. Otherwise, thanks for sticking with us. Please do consider liking and subscribing, helps the channel out, and I'll see you next time.